up, sports fans. Your favorite sportsbook, BetUS.com, is back for our 28th year of NFL action. With the industry's biggest sign-up bonus of up to 200%, BetUS offers our members the opportunity to cash in on all your favorite sports, including NFL, NBA, MLB, and more. We've also got hundreds of new casino games, including the coolest new European slots, and our live dealers are waiting for you at the table. Sign up at BetUS.com today to get into the action. BetUS, where the game begins.
And now, broadcasting live from Las Vegas, the Snake Sports Talk Show with Jake Silva starts now.
There we go, ladies and gentlemen. We are live. I am super stoked on a Wednesday for what we got coming here for you on the Snake Sports Talk Show. Wherever and however you may be watching and listening. Chase, of course, partner Tron joining us. I'm excited for this one because Strober of Locked On Wizards, we're going to be talking NBA. We got a lot going on, especially with training camp underway in the NFL, but there is so much to really unpack. I'm excited for this one because, man, next week, it's on. The NFL Hall of Fame game, Lions, Chargers, Detroit Lions, and Jim Harbaugh. I can't get enough of it, man. So I'm excited about it this next week.
I know, I'm excited too, man. It's gonna be interesting to see what's gonna happen. And it's gonna be nice to see future coach of the Cleveland Browns, Jesse Minter, and that defense and what he can do and everything. It's gonna be nice.
See, Chase is already getting geared up for it. So Ben Strober around the corner. I thought about this, and I think it is interesting to know that the NFL. Every year when we get up and into training camps, there's always certain things that we look for, certain rookies, certain, second-year pros, and guys that are going to honestly work hard to make the 53-man roster. And we know that it's not a easy thing to do. But we know right now that in training camps and what's happening is that there are certain players that are holding out. I'll get to the Cincinnati stuff here in just a moment around the corner, but I actually wanted to talk about what's happening with the Washington Commanders. We know we've been talking about them the last couple of weeks. We've had a couple of really good people on and many trustworthy people I know from David Harrison and multiple people. But my big thing is about the Washington Commanders. We know that they're bringing back the old vibes of the old Redskins logos and, of course, their colors. But the thing is, Terry McLaurin, their wide receiver, he didn't show up in camp, and there's things happening about the contract situation. Things aren't really getting settled in. And I look at Washington, and to me, what they've capped off from last season is that they made it to the NFC East, the NFC Championship game. And Jaden Daniels is a one-of-a-kind quarterback, snap-and-go type mentality, and somebody who's faced a lot of adversity. Well, you're going to face a lot of it if you don't get this right with Terry McLaurin. And now Terry, we know, in the last few years has had several quarterbacks that he's had, but yet still is making up the numbers. 1,000 receiving yards, scoring up a bunch of touchdowns. The guy is the heart and soul of this roster, and we all know that. And it's also what helps when you get someone like Jaden Daniels in the building who's competent, he's faced adversity, and he's coachable. And this is part of the stuff that Washington was trying to turn the page on. So everybody's excited about it, but it's also harder when you have a situation like this where it feels like it's a fork in the road. And to me, I still have Washington being a competitive team, but when this kind of stuff happens, sometimes it can change the narrative of the team. And usually you look at that in the first 5 weeks of the season. So I still have hopes they will get a deal done. But Terry McLaurin, at the same time, he is very deserving of the contract that he wants. Now, we know that wide receivers all across the league, they chirp all the time. And which is why I even made that comment about, George Pickens, who gets traded from Pittsburgh to Dallas. And I feel like in Dallas, I even saw some interviews, he looks happy. And he's trying to change the narrative of what the Pittsburgh Steelers and their culture and what they're looking for right now. And I feel like they need to change. And Dallas now, with a new opportunity for George Pickens, he's probably going to have a Cortland Sutton season. But so the last thing that you want is to having a player unhappy. And Terry McLaurin, who's gone through so much adversity, gone through many quarterbacks, and has gone through a series of, just weird stuff happening around up in DC, but things seem like they're getting better. I mean, they're going to have the football team back up in DC, which is what I'm excited for, because you want that back. You don't want to tear apart what you thrived on years ago before Dan Snyder, and when he ended up owning the team, and then it just became absolute literal hell. But at the same time, you do want to reward the players who do work the hardest. And so Terry McLaurin, as I understand the chirps, but if they don't get a deal done, then the unfortunate part is that what do you do at this point, and what are you going to get for him? Now, he's going to be a player wanting a contract, and we know that. But there are some suitable teams. We've heard Denver becoming a mix. We've heard the Chargers could be an interesting one. And then there's even, San Francisco and a couple of other teams who could be looking for a wide receiver. I don't want to be pushing the button yet. I think Washington, they're in a position where they got to get a deal done, but we know that some of these things don't always smooth itself out pretty quickly. Usually it's a process. It's all about two sides got to at least, have the language in the contract right, and then it's worked great for both parties. I know Washington fans, I'm like, listen, take a deep breath. Just know, like, these are the kind of things that you're going to get through with players, because players, they get expensive. And sometimes they're going to want more with the work that they put in. But take a deep breath and reassure yourselves they're going to get a deal done, and hopefully they can at least have their number one wide receiver. And now that you bring in Deebo Samuel, who I think really works in the scheme fit, they'll be better than what last year even was. Or, to me, they'll be a competent team in the next 5 years. So hopefully they'll get a deal done. But with Terry McLaurin, and even for players like this, and I'll get to Cincinnati in the back half, because, I mean, you're in a better position right now than you are in Cincinnati. You got a first-round pick, and then you got an edge rusher who they're both not happy. You don't want to be in that type of situation and scenario. But Washington, they'll be in a better position than that. So speaking of Washington, our guest coming up, because, and you know what? I'm curious because I've also watched the documentary that involved Gilbert Arenas. I actually am really curious to kind of get his thoughts up on this one, but we know the NBA, been a lot of action in the offseason, lots of moves. But joining us to discuss it in the D.C. area, you hear him all the time, and talking about the Washington Wizards, Ben Strober joins us here on the... Now, we know you got the Washington Commanders colors up and in there, and see, there's already positive hopes that, hey, they're going to get something done up from here. But Ben, it is interesting when I look at the NBA and a lot of just the movements that happen. I mean, KD going to Houston and a bunch of others, and then there's these talks about LeBron James could potentially be up and on the move. Nothing set in stone yet. But we know that, like, the NBA and what we watched last season is you watch two small market teams go head to head in the finals. One of them made it all the way to the mountain. So when you think about that, does it kind of give you a boost of confidence and then some reassurance, even when covering the Washington Wizards, as long as you have, that maybe Washington, they look at it like, hey, the Pacers are looking good. The Magic ended up making up some moves. So it's like, why not us? Has there been some kind of has that kind of lingered on the back of Wizards fans' minds, looking at that and what we got last season?
Yeah, absolutely. If you take a look at what Oklahoma City did this year, the 68 wins capped off by an NBA championship, that gives you reassurance as a Wizards fan, because Will Dawkins, the new, not even that new general manager, now it's been 2 years since he took over the helm to clean up the disaster that was left by the previous two regimes under Ernie Grunfeld and Tommy Shepard. He comes right off that Sam Presti tree, and he has instilled a lot of the same mentalities, a lot of the same strategies that we have seen from Sam Presti. and Oklahoma City. One of the aspects we see is guys who will play 2 to 3 years in the summer league. And throughout the Wizards summer league, we always saw the guys playing about 2 games. A lot of the second-year guys like Bub Carrington, Alex Sarr, Keyshawn George. But I think there's a lot to look forward to with this Wizards organization because the Thunder took a very similar trajectory. You spend a couple years in the bottom. And essentially what you do at this point when you're in the NBA, the way you have to do it is you have to find a direction. And the direction for the Thunder was the youth movement. And they became the youngest team, I think, in history, if I'm not wrong about that, to win an NBA Finals. And the Wizards have one of the youngest teams in the NBA right now. I think they have 12 guys between the age of 19 and 24 years old. You have 9 former first-round picks from the last 3 years. I think 8 now, actually, after Blake Wesley was waived a couple days ago. But the Wizards have done exactly what needed to happen for such a long time, which was to tear everything down and just actually have a sense of direction through rebuilding and trying to establish a young core like the Wizards have. And not to say that it's 100% going to work, because it might not. Some of these guys might pan out. You could make the argument that the Wizards don't have a superstar player on the roster yet. And we know in the NBA how important that is, with the Thunder, of course, find a gem trading for Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, who becomes the MVP and the Finals MVP. Do the Wizards have that kind of player yet? It's too early to tell, but I like the direction that Washington has taken. And I think some of the examples we've seen, like Indiana's run this past year in Oklahoma City, does give you a little bit extra hope that the Wizards are trending the right way right now.
So I've seen, with some veterans that are up and in this roster with CJ McCollum and Chris Middleton. And, because looking at Alex Sarr, I think the kid does have, the potential, and especially at the size that he's at, he's going to be that 4 that, is really going to tear things up from the defensive side and then giving you the added points from within the perimeter. So to add, the veteran, at least the veteran experience and presence up from here, because the most important thing in what we've watched is that, we got more physical play, especially with the hand checks, which I enjoy that because it makes basketball really interesting. So with watching that, and then even seeing just this roster in particular and what the game plan will be for this upcoming season, because we know with the summer leagues going on, youngsters, you got draft picks right now trying to work their way in on this roster. So seeing that and having these vets like Middleton and like McCollum, this is going to give them the step to where we got the right guys that are going to at least take the right kinds of shots and open looks, but then also add a little bit more of that physicality and defense to where it will allow the Wizards, from what they were last year, to hopefully maybe making themselves a little bit more in the middle of the pack this upcoming season, right?
Yeah, one thing to note with this Wizards team is a first-round pick, a top 8 protected pick, is what the Wizards currently hold, but that does go to the New York Knicks if the Wizards do finish in a position that takes them out of the top 8. So finishing bottom 4 in the league would guarantee them a top 8 pick. Of course, they don't have to necessarily finish in the bottom 4. They could luck out in the lottery, which never seems to happen here in Washington, but you could still be excited about getting Trey Johnson, of course. I think what they have right now on the roster, and the veterans are going to play such a key piece, not because they're going to win you a bunch of ball games, because I don't think this team is going to win a lot of games next year. I do think they're going to improve. I would expect that win total to go up from 18. I'd say they win around like 24 to 25 games would be a good season, because you can make the argument that if they don't win more games this year, if you don't see key development from some of the young players you have, then that's not really a successful season. I know that the front office doesn't really have the interest of losing that top 8 protected pick, because they had Will Dawkins on the ESPN broadcast during the summer league, and they asked him, they said, hey, Will, the East is in a very advantageous situation for a lot of these teams right now because of all the star players that are currently going to be out for the season, and everyone seems to be down right now. Is there any chance you guys flirt with the play-in? And very diplomatically, he said that they had no interest in losing the top 8 pick. He said, we want to get to where we believe this organization can get to, but we don't want to take any shortcuts. We don't want to skip any steps in that. And I think another year of bottoming out and having the development throughout the regular season is what's in the cards for Washington right now. Now, the year after that, when they hopefully add another super talented player to the roster next year, and tough news for Elijah Arenas, a guy that was definitely on the radar for Wizards fans, actually, given the ties with Gilbert. And then he was probably going to be one of the top picks in the draft next year, potentially. He'll be out for the year with a torn, I think it was meniscus that they reported just like 15 minutes ago. But if you get one of those talented guys in the draft and pair that along, hopefully you see development out of Alex Sarr, as you mentioned. He needs to get more physical around the rim and be the kind of beast that he can, because there's at times where he'll get down there and he finds himself in a good position, but he's just, he just kind of lacks the mentality. He's a little bit too soft down there at times. And I think that's one thing that needs to change. But if they get development from all those guys, find the key pieces they think that can be there for them long-term, that'll allow them to really make some moves in the offseason, because they're going to have a ton of financial flexibility as well. When they made the trade to deal away Sadiq Bey and Jordan Poole a month ago, that essentially was a move that took away $80 million off their books next offseason. They'll have $100 million in cap space to work with. And not to say they're going to go out there and sign a bunch of free agents, because that kind of era of the NBA is almost dead at this point. I think free agency isn't quite what it used to be. But the Wizards will once again be a hub at the deadline where they can trade for some less favorable contracts from organizations that are trying to dump them. They can acquire more assets like first-round picks or whatever picks they use. And now we can put a premium on second-round picks. We saw that Washington was able to use 2 of those second-round picks they had acquired in a couple different trades to get a super young, talented piece in Cam Whitmore, who gets to come back home and play. He's from Maryland, so that's a pretty cool story that they'll get him back, one of the more young, talented offensive pieces in the league. Don't know what his role is going to look like, but there's a lot to look forward to. And even though they're not going to win a lot of games next year, I'm looking forward to seeing the excitement from the young guys night in, night out.
So it's interesting, and I'm actually glad that you shifted it up onto this area, because of the fact that just the area of the NBA we can see is vastly changing, and where you start to see a lot of these young teams who rely on, getting into the top 8 in the draft picks and getting the youngsters to build them, develop them. And even if you go and you trade away a star of what the Thunder did with trading away Paul George, they get SGA out of the Clippers, and people are thinking did the Clippers make a mistake on that? I'm like, no, the whole point of it was you wanted to get another star. That's what Kawhi wanted. So at that point, you start looking at the slow growth and build of the young youth. And now you're starting to see teams like that are really building and developing. Pacers got speed. The Thunder, they've extended a lot of their youngsters, and they've got their 3-4 best players up from there. So I just feel like we've shifted towards to where we obviously want veteran leadership, no doubt about it. But you also do want to have the youth to where you got the minutes, you got the defense, you got the shots and points. But when I start looking at it, even from college hoops, because I love watching college basketball every year up in March when the tournament comes on, and because with the NIL and the transfer portal as well, it works perfectly for college football, because every year I always know that there's going to be a day one player ready to play, or somebody that's going to fit my 53-man roster. But when I look at the state of the NBA, players now are going to be coming back into college, not just particularly for NIL money, but because some of them, they want more of the experience. They want to be more prepared coming in the NBA. So when I think about this, I think we're going to come to a point where, I look at the NBA lottery draft and I'm like, do we even need this thing? If the talent gets better in the pool, like how we're looking at the NFL, maybe the NBA, these draft picks up at some point will hold a little more of a bigger value somewhere down up into the future. Is that kind of something that they're looking forward to in this Adam Silver type of, situation that we'll look at in the future of the NBA?
Yeah, because I feel like we're starting to put more of a premium on second-round picks in the NBA. And just growing up, I'm a young kid, 21 years old. Second-round picks were pretty much an afterthought. You never even really heard about the dudes that were taken in the second round. You mostly would stash them on your G League roster. They'd play there for a couple of years. Sometimes they make it and become great players. I know Jokic is the best example of that, one of the best players ever, drafted during a Taco Bell commercial or whatever the lore is behind that. But now that it's a real possibility, you grab super talented players in the second round. I think one thing the Wizards actually did in this draft that I really enjoyed was you take a flyer on a guy that's 24 years old, and Jameer Watkins, who was their second round pick out of Florida State. And a lot of guys now that come out of college, you either play 1 year and you're like an 18, 19-year-old fresh young pup, you go right to the NBA to try to develop because you have a lot of potential there, or you stay in college because it's genuinely really hard to get significant minutes at a legit program now as an 18 or 19-year-old, because because of NIL and because of the way things shape up with the transfer portal. You saw the Auburn starting lineup this year in March Madness, team in the final. Everyone was 23 or 24 years old. So I just don't know how you're supposed to even compete with that as an 18-year-old fresh out of high school. Now that you have guys that are 23, 24 trying to make it in the league, and there's kind of the age discrimination factor to it, but these are dudes that seriously can play. So there is significant value to taking these guys in the second round, because you could make the argument they're already a little more polished than some of the guys that might go in the first round just based on potential. They might not have as high of a ceiling as the guys that would go in the first round, but if you're a team that's in a kind of win now position, you already have some key pieces there, but you're looking for someone that will give you some 3-point shooting off the bench right away, like an absolute assassin from deep. You could take one of those guys in the second round, slot them into the role you want them, and they could be perfectly serviceable right there in the NBA. So I think that's kind of the way it shifted due to the changing era of college basketball. And I'm glad the Wizards made a decision to take a flyer on a guy that was pretty experienced and polished as a defender, just not as much offensively. That'll be a work in progress for Jameer Watkins, but really good stuff from him in the summer league defensively, led the entire circuit there in steals per game with 4.
So I want to ask you this, and I'm curious of it. Now, we know that obviously very knowledgeable in the basketball world. And so, you guys have the Washington Mystics up and out there for the WNBA. And, I look at this as a growing sport the same way that I look at with the NHL. I think, the Four Nations tournament was fantastic. The fact that they drew the amount of ratings that they did, and people love that. When you get players passionate, playing for their countries, it's a totally different feel. And they land a new TV deal with Canada, and then there's a possibility of new expansion teams down the horizon. So the WNBA, they're at this growing point, but I feel like that there's a part of it that it's like people want to have the credit for themselves in some ways because of like the whole Caitlin Clark effect. To me personally, I just look at it this way, and watching basketball as we have. I mean, we felt this way about the nostalgia with Michael Jordan because Michael was so iconic. Nobody really knew how to really contain it or defend it or any of that. And then it was just like, instead of like really kind of throwing shades, we want to embrace it. I mean, the Jordan brand, the Air Nikes, and it was just like basketball had a style. It had a flavor to it. For the WNBA with the Caitlin Clark thing, to me, she's remarkable. She's a great player. And I feel like it's really going to change the whole platform of the WNBA for the next few years. But my takeaway of it is we know that there's going to be new money. We know the CBA is going to obviously change and grow pretty vastly. And these women do deserve the contracts that they get. But my big thing is that when you look at someone like Caitlin Clark, in my opinion, I look at it as more of an asset than I look of it as, well, before she even got here, we had players. I'm like, we're aware of that, but it's like she's the pillar that's really causing the jump to now get larger. So when you look at this of the growth of a sport, because in my opinion, I want to be able to support the valuable asset that I have that I know is going to affect many of these young athletes around this league to where I got shoe deals. I got endorsements. I'm in commercials. I'm getting bigger contracts. So when you think about that, and even with just the Mystics, and it's like, will that eventually, like, because I think they need to get it. I think they need to get it together. They're going to get paid. The money's going to come up. What has been kind of your thoughts in this situation? Because to me, I would hate for a growing sport to not know how to really get this in line to where now the officiating's better, and then all the players, they're getting all of their cuts because of that one valuable asset.
It's such like a cut and dry issue for me because it's just there's so many different ways to look at it. And I'm really glad you brought up the value that Caitlin Clark has brought to the sport, because there was an article, maybe it was in The Athletic, I can't really remember, but they had economists really check out exactly how much she was worth to the WNBA, and they determined that Caitlin Clark was worth $1 billion to the WNBA. Like, she had generated $1 billion worth of revenue based on everything she does for the association. So that's just remarkable in itself, nonetheless, of how good she is and why she's the transcending talent that really took over the sport. and made it into what it is the past couple of years. And now you've got some flavor with the other players that have, also come in the upbringing and people have taken notice of that. I think Clark was a pivotal part of that because people started to notice women's basketball as a sport. And there's always been a ton of talent in the WNBA. It's just been overlooked. There wasn't the star that the sport necessarily needed to get things going for people to notice some of the other best players that were part of the association. As for what happens with the CBA, I don't really have like a clear answer of what I think really is the solution there, but I've been keeping up with the Mystics this year for sure. Obviously, the ownership group here for the Washington Wizards is also the ownership group that's in charge of the Mystics. So it's been great to see the way they've kind of gone through a similar looking rebuild to the Wizard. And I've been to some of the games. They've drawn some really good crowds out there. People have definitely taken interest in the team and the town. And I've been excited with what they've been able to do. They're definitely ahead of schedule right now. I believe they're in a position where they'd actually make the postseason. So I think that'd be really great for the city, great for the sport, because I think Washington, D.C. is a place where women's basketball really can thrive due to the demographics that we have in the nation's capital here. And I think the proof is in the pudding right now with people being interested in the team. So hopefully the WNBA, as over the years go on, can kind of get everything figured out. So everything can remain smooth and the league can continue to grow the way it has, because for a long time, I think first 30 or so years of the NBA or whatever it was, the league struggled until it got, the star players that it needed eventually down the road. And the NBA skyrocketed into the empire it is now. And you just hope that you could see a similar trajectory with the WNBA here over the next couple of years. I mean, the expansion is great. I know someone personally that's a Mystics fan because he went to school with me at the University of Maryland, but he's from Philadelphia, and Philadelphia is going to get a team in 2030. So he'll jump ship and become a fan of them in 2030. But I think that's great that they're going to have expansion and people are already taking notice and interest in that.
And it's interesting because it's like we have the Sixers for as long as we have, and I'm just like, I'm surprised we never even had a WNBA team in Philadelphia, because I'm like, that's going to add a little bit more into the culture and such. And so, it's been drawing up a crowd. In fact, me being a Vegas born and now living up in Colorado, I mean, I've been to an Aces game when they played the Liberty, and it was stacked of a house because of two competitive teams, and the women were just absolutely just on fire on the court, offensively, defensively. So hopefully in a growing sport, they'll really get things together. One last thing before we let you go and shift on. So I've had such an enjoyment with documentaries that I've watched up on Netflix, and more particularly on Untold. I mean, they've had fantastic, documentaries. But I watched and I was evaluating on, and I remember this as a kid when this ended up happening, but the Gilbert Arenas story. I remember when it hit the news, and to me, I loved watching Gilbert Arenas playing up and on the court with Washington, because it was just that the Wizards needed something. And like, I even remember having an old school, and you'll love this, I had a old school Washington Bullets Chris Webber jersey. And and so like they needed something that was really going to help out where, I mean, you already had the Capitals where with Alex Ovechkin, they were going to be fine for years. And then obviously, from Redskins to Commanders, they've had a culture, and we know that they've been kind of up and down, but now it seems like they've gotten things under control. Mm-hmm. So at that timeline, Gilbert Arenas was a rising star. Unfortunately, things didn't work out with the Lakers, and then comes to Washington and is like, it's a breath of fresh air for Wizard fans. Like, we could finally be on the map. We're finally getting competitive. And I loved what they were doing up from there. But then watching all through the documentary, Ben, it was just really interesting. And it taps me back into when that first happened. And I'm just like, my thing is, obviously, if you had with the coaching up and involved in getting players straightened out, it would have been a completely different situation where we would have never had to gone through this type of scenario. So when you look at that documentary and just how you evaluated that in your best of terms, like how this situation could have been handled and how it really changed a bit of that trajectory of the Wizards organization when that happened.
So this is like a story, obviously, that I remember from when I was really, really young, because I don't even remember in relation what exact year it was. And I haven't even had the chance to watch the full documentary. I've just kind of seen the bits and pieces of it. But I know that the organization for so long, really until the last couple of years when the new front office came in led under Michael Winger, Will Dawkins, Travis Schlenk, and all those guys came in. The organization was a complete mess. There was a lot of dysfunction. I think there was too much of an input from ownership for so many years, and it led to so many bad decisions being made and the organization mishandling a ton of things over the past couple of years, with that really being a testament of the way the organization was at one point. And, just like thinking back on Gilbert Arenas and what his impact was, like you said, it was a breath of fresh air for people in DC because this is a basketball town really at heart. And football is the name of the game. Everybody talks football 24/7 in the DC area. It runs everything. It always has, and it always will. But when basketball is buzzing in the nation's capital, like you will feel that. You will feel that maybe even more so than the Capitals last 20 years, which is really hard to do because the Capitals have been the pinnacle of success throughout every single year. I mean, they consistently have found themselves in the playoffs, have a transcending talent who became the all-time leading goal scorer. But in the NBA, just you think back to some of those years when you had the big three and Butler, Jameson, and Arenas, and then years later after that, the core that they built around John Wall and Bradley Beal. The Wizards were a really fun and lively organization around the city. There was a lot of buzz about them. And unfortunately, as things kind of came crashing down, at first it was with the whole Arenas thing, and then the organization kind of had to reset from there. Got lucky. They win the lottery, get John Wall, which gave them the spark they needed to get back to where they wanted to be 4 or 5 years after that. But after Wall got hurt, and then they gave Beal the worst contract in history, you kind of see how dull things could get. I mean, we had MVP chants for Bronny James in Capital One Arena last year to show really how low things had gotten. You hope you're going to get to a better place, but it shows you what star players can do for an organization the way Gilbert Arenas did. And I know this is not really the exact answer to exactly what you were talking about, how they handled that situation, but everything was just a nightmare, top to bottom within the Wizards organization at that point. And I think that's been pretty clear to most people that have followed the NBA for years and years. But it's just a sad story overall because of, what he was able to do for Wizard fandom at the time and how quickly it crashed down after that. And then the injuries, of course, made his contract one of the worst in NBA history at the time.
Yeah, it's interesting. And I always kind of ask myself of like, what could have been, if something that if that situation never happened, I mean, how this roster and how the team itself, could we have eventually seen this team, make a finals run, and so it often, sometimes when things like that really kind of hit, it's like now you're kind of stuck with what now. And then with the John Wall situation, I remember that big hype, coming out of Kentucky and how they played. And so, yeah, it's like usually it's always about how you recover even after a situation like that. And so, and, like we said, we're always hoping that teams often get better every single year. And then even with youth movement, with a team that, kind of fell short, but they're willing to rebound back. And so, yeah, there's always room for improvement, and I'm excited for what, the upcoming season will look like for him. But Ben, appreciate you for coming on by, man. Thank you so much for sharing your insights. And for our audiences here, tapping in and locking in where people can find out all of your content on the Washington Wizards all season long.
Yeah, you can check us out on Locked On Wizards on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. And then you can follow me on Twitter as well at Ben Strober Media. And then our show page on Twitter is just Locked On Wizards. Jake, appreciate you having me on. Great work you're doing over here, and let's do it again sometime.
Absolutely, man. Always down to do so. Take care of yourself, man. Enjoy the rest of the week. We'll see you soon.
Thanks. Have a good one.
You too. Yeah. Well, I will tell you, it's really interesting because, I mean, when I watched that documentary on shooting guards, it was intense. I remember it like it was yesterday. And when the news itself broke out, I was just like, why? I mean, you built such a great culture, and especially in a city like DC. I mean, we have the Nationals winning the World Series in 2019. The Capitals win the Stanley Cup in 2018. And then you're hoping that even after the dominances of the 80s and the 70s for Washington, for the Redskins, you're hoping, when are the Wizards going to get there? And I was just like, man, I find
And the
myself.
fact that the Commanders were just one game away from making it back
I
to the
know.
big
It's
stage
like,
again, like
could you imagine how just absolutely packed and insane the entire DC area would be? I mean, there's a lot of, it's a great, honestly, if you've never been, I mean, I know it's very political, but the art museums, a lot of the artifacts, it's definitely well worth putting it on your bucket list to travel.
oh yeah, no, I've been there several times. Got to actually, I made the choice between going to the Holocaust Museum or going to a Nationals game that day, just because, I told myself I'd be back in DC again to be able to see that kind of stuff, and I'm a history person, but it's also like I don't know when I'll get to go to a Nationals game again. So I'm just like, I want to visit every baseball stadium and football stadium. I'm going to go see a Nationals game. And they ended up winning that year. I think that was the year that they went to the World Series, but it wasn't until like towards the end of the season when the record started getting better, just because, at that point in time when I went, they were like, I think 10 games out of the wild card. And then that's the year that they made it to, like, they were the last wild card spot and ended up going all the way. So,
yeah, and it's insane. And they didn't even have the best record in baseball.
They didn't, and they leaned on the back of Steven Strasburg and carried it all the way to the World Series.
That pitching rotation was just unbelievable. But
it was Steven Strasburg, Max Scherzer, and I forgot who the third guy was.
It was Anibal Sanchez, I remembered, and Patrick Corbin.
Yeah.
It was like there was so many really good arms. But yeah, that's why I'm just like, and I think it's a great thing too, what he mentioned about with just the platform of the WNBA, because I don't understand this shade on Caitlin Clark, first of all. It's like she's a valuable asset to you. And it's like you're the reason your sport is growing. Why look at it as like she's an enemy? Like, It's not all just about her. It's what she's willing to do to help you in your situation where we got expansion teams. We've got new money in CBA contract agreements. And then we got endorsement deals and shoe deals. Like, wouldn't you want more of that? I mean, when Michael came around, it gave us such a nostalgia to where then you got talented players like Kobe, and then LeBron and multiple others. And it's just like, why screw that up? But we got a lot to talk about. So coming up next here, Chase, you're going to love this one. I was actually listening on, and you would be surprised. This is why the San Francisco 49ers, it is all or nothing for them this upcoming season, and I'm going to tell you why coming up and after the break. So since 1950s, Maker's Mark has been the pivotal mark of making the most delicious single-barrel Kentucky straight bourbon for many, many years. And so with the best flavor, and at the same time from some of the many distillers there that have made the matriarch of what Maker's Mark is all about, and leaving their mark for being the best delicious bourbon that you will ever taste and purchase, and to be able to enjoy it with all the best people, whether coworkers, family members, friends, even your spouses, whatever your mark is in your life. Make the same mark with Maker's Mark and see why that the journey, even for as long as it has, why they are always the best of the best. When you pour a glass, I like to enjoy it either mixed or even up and on the rock. That's my opinion there. But get yourself a bottle today and see why that red mark on every single bottle always means something pivotal. Whatever it may be. Enjoy responsibly, 21 or over. Make your mark with Maker's.
Looking for a show with the best takes and opinions? Want a show with the best coverage around the world of sports? Jam-packed with an all-star interview lineup? Then the best place to find it all, sports and entertainment, is right here. Join Jake Silva on the Snake Sports Talk Show, presented by SeatGeek and BetUS. Weeknights at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 Pacific on Sports Wave Network.
Want to find your seat for the event of your choice but can't get one that fits your desire or your budget? Well, my friends, SeatGeek has you covered. SeatGeek is the official sponsor of the Snake Sports Talk Show. With a list of over hundreds of events to choose from, SeatGeek will assure you that you won't miss your seat with the amazing view of your choice at the most affordable price. Whether it's looking for your best seat in the house of your favorite sports team, finding live concerts that get you closer to your favorite artist, or enjoying your spot at your favorite live shows, comedies, and more, SeatGeek has it all just for you. Go online to SeatGeek.com or download the app on your mobile device through Google Play and the App Store. And as a special offer before checkout, use promo code SNAKESPORTS and save yourself $20 off of your purchase of your first ticket and experience why SeatGeek is the most trusted ticketing app for your next event. Remember, that's SeatGeek.com and download the app on your phone with promo code SNAKESPORTS for $20 off and find your seat with SeatGeek.
So, I love listening to morning sports every single morning. It's how I really prepare for the up-and-coming season and also prepare for the show. So, I know I talked about this before because I was skeptical of this team, but the San Francisco 49ers is up-and-coming season. Many people are excited for because Brock Purdy gets a new contract. They're hopeful about Brandon Ayuk's return and all the rest of it. But to me, when I talk about the San Francisco 49ers, and Chase is my witness up and in this, I don't trust with the way that the season may potentially look for them. Now, the schedule may show you one way, but to me, I see another. And this is why this year is really important for the Niners to potentially make the playoffs and to end up maybe even making it further. But that's all going to be reliant on what Kyle Shanahan and company really do to rebound. We know that there was important injuries. We know Brock Purdy did not look like his best. In fact, if you look at it in some of the season stat lines, he literally had almost nearly a season like Jimmy Garoppolo, I believe, in 21. I had a very good colleague who broke it down, and it will alarm you so much about, wow, they almost look nearly identical. But I'm not trying to bash Brock Purdy. I think he's a great kid. I think he's got a lot of really good high hopes and will do good things for this organization. But all of this is more pertaining to Kyle Shanahan, because how many times are you going to be in this position with San Francisco and yet not win a title? And we know that a lot of it is that Kyle Shanahan at times, has tried to get full control and has tried to pivot his way to where the Niners could eventually win a Super Bowl, or even at a time when he was up in Atlanta. I mean, everybody all remembered how exciting it was in that first half against the Patriots in Super Bowl 51 when he was an offensive coordinator. And then all of a sudden, the rest of the history from there. But Kyle Shanahan has been to multiple Super Bowls with San Francisco and has been to multiple NFC title games. And all that Niners fans are hoping is the day that they would be able to turn the page and make it happen and not be in their way. So why I don't believe this Niners season is going to come into fruition with what many fans are optimistic for is a few reasons. Number one is you paid Brock Purdy high amount of money. What happens with quarterbacks in the first year when they get high amounts of money on their new contracts? They often become inconsistent, or somewhere down in the rest of that stretch of the season, they get hurt. It just happens. Okay, I mean, we've seen this with multiple players. The other part is your players, Christian McCaffrey, George Kittle, and multiple, even Trent Williams. Some of these guys are going to get old. Are you going to trust a lot of that young core? And here's the thing. I don't even know what Brandon Ayuk is going to look like post-injury. Is he even going to be productive this upcoming season? Ricky Pearsall. We know that they got a rookie in Jacob Cowing. And then the Jawan Jennings contract dispute. San Francisco's going up through a lot. What I ended up finding out, and this might actually shock Chase here a little bit, but I ended up finding this out. I didn't believe it at first, but I was thinking to a lot of Niner fans, is that you get excited about San Francisco and then they look good in the first 3 quarters. You know what Kyle Shanahan's record is in the 4th quarter when they're trailing by 8? He's 0-43. That's alarming. What that tells me is Kyle Shanahan doesn't have a 4th gear. There's no adjustment. Why you look at a lot of these veteran coaches like Andy Reid, Jim Harbaugh, John Harbaugh, and multiple others, what do they all have in common? They have a 4th gear. It's all about trust and culture. That's what they're all about. And when you make an adjustment, you got to be sure that you trust the adjustment for it to execute. And unfortunately for Kyle Shanahan, there's not a ton of trust there. He's got no 4th gear, which makes it harder. And then when he tries to adjust, it seems like he's the one getting in the way. So this is why this season is so important for San Francisco, because you've heard it from Niner fans every single time. He gets there, but then we lose out. Whether it's a Super Bowl, NFC Championship, whatever it is. I mean, that's a very talented roster, but too, you lost that many players in the offseason, and then you're dealing with the contracts, you're dealing with the cap space. I don't know. I hate to break it down to Niner fans, but this season may look scary to them. I mean, I got the Rams winning this division. I know Seattle's defense is going to honestly be competitive. And as far as the Cardinals, could be interesting. But I'm telling you, I am just worried that many Niner fans are going to have such high hopes, and all those expectations are going to be thrown down the toilet if you do not have Kyle Shanahan pivoting to a 4th gear, or even has a 4th gear somewhere in the middle of it. So really interesting stuff, but that's what validated so much about what my opinion and my thought is going into the season for what San Francisco would look like. But all the best. People all think it's an easy schedule, and for them to get 10 wins, it looks like that. But yeah, I don't know. It will be interesting. Chase to the news.
This is the Hot Press.
How alarming is that? I didn't believe it until I literally heard it, and then all of a sudden it was true. 8 points and trailing in the 4th quarter, and you're 0-43. Since being a coach in this organization.
If he was a better coach in the 4th quarter, he'd have 3 Super Bowl rings right now.
He would, and that's why it was like,
3.
I think, because I've talked to many Niner fans, and I've actually heard a couple of them that they're just like, Kyle has to get something done, because a lot of this ties into Jed York and how they really have ran things in the past, and we know with John Lynch has had his fair shares, but we know that there's been hits and misses. But this is where it's just like, when do you really pinpoint this thing and say, Shanahan doesn't have a 4th gear? And that's the hardest part. Any fan, like of any coach, would honestly feel disappointed in. Because I think he's a very bright mind. And I even look at that with Mike McDaniel, but it's like, if you ain't got a 4th gear, or you ain't even got some sort of backbone even in that locker room, because Miami, I don't know, I don't trust Miami worth anything right now because of just the way things have been handled. Left tackle I don't trust, and I just feel like with the moves they made, it's asking for both him and Chris Greer to get fired. I mean, I just see it.
There's a lot of coaches and or GMs that are going to get fired this next offseason. I can right now I can safely predict 7.
Yeah, every year.
Safely predict 7.
Yeah.
I think that Shane Steichen and Chris Ballard are going to get fired with the Colts. I think that Andrew Berry and Kevin Stefanski will get fired for Cleveland if things don't work out with them this year. I could definitely see Mike McDaniels and Greer get fired for Miami. Those are 3 right off the bat that I could safely sit here and say, yeah, that's going to happen. I could see Jonathan Gannon for Arizona if he doesn't get things going in the playoffs and everything. So
I think a lot of that, honestly, when it comes to Jonathan Gannon in Arizona, I think a lot of that does kind of tail into Kyler Murray, his play. Because it's like, don't leave us in a position to where it's like, do we really want to think about drafting a quarterback? Because then that's where a lot of questions start to pose. I feel bad for Indianapolis because that roster just is, it's so good. But I mean, I watched that video of AR in training camp. Really? Overthrowing Mo Alley Cox? Like, this is not looking good, Chase.
Just wow. That's all I got to say. I mean, shocking dark horse candidate that I can see getting fired. Maybe not the GM, but the coach. If San Fran doesn't work out this year,
yes,
and they have a bad record, I can see Kyle Shanahan getting let go.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. If he ain't got no fork here, don't tell us don't say we didn't warn you. This is why we have our show for a reason. So I mean,
and same thing with the Giants. Like, they already gave them the ultimatum. Like, either have a good season or you're gone. Brian Daboll and Joe Shane are going to be gone.
I feel like Joe Shane's more in that hot seat. Brian Daboll, if he gives you a fighting chance, then I could see it where it's just Joe Shane. But
I can see it just Joe Shane as well. But that's already 6 teams right there. That's 6 teams that you could definitely see, at the end of the season of this next year, possibly looking for a new coach and GM. Yep. And it's insane. But as we go through the offseason right now and all of the training camps that are happening, there is quite a few players that have either been carted off the field due to injuries or are on the injured reserves or physically unable to perform list due to other obligations. And a lot of people are questioning whether or not it's that they're actually staying in game shape during the offseason. I'm like, guys, you got to realize, like, these guys are just getting back from having 4 or 5 months off. They're getting back into the swing of things. They got to get back to their physical, like, game shape and everything. It's going to take some time and everything. So you are going to have issues with what's going on. But I have heard that Terry McLaurin, if things don't work out with him, he will be on the trade block, and they're asking for a high second-round pick in order for them to move on from him.
Do you know how many teams right now, because I even saw the spinning wheel, do you know how many teams would be on top of that?
Oh,
like
100%.
Like I said, I think that the best fits that could happen for a second-round pick, I could see the Chargers becoming one, because to me, Terry McLaurin is a perfect example of leadership and somebody that can be in a healthy environment, because no shade against Washington, but because they are building up to be better, but to even have a competent coach and then have the quarterback. Because remember, Jaden Daniels, that was his only rookie season, but to upgrade to a quarterback who's been doing this for 6 years, I mean, Terry McLaurin would be like in heaven at this point. And then you look at a couple other spots. I saw some, like the Raiders were in a mix, which kind of interesting, but it's just like, look, you did this with Devontae Adams. Are you willing to want to do that again? I mean, I love their pick in Jack Besh. Like, that kid, hard worker. I think he's got a lot of really good stuff. So you pair him and Brock Bowers together. That's actually going to be a very good duo for the next couple of years. But there are some really, really good teams that are up and out there. But it depends on the ones that they know that they would really look for. Oh, that's that piece. That's that piece that we need.
Yeah. I mean, while we're on the topic of, certain players and everything possibly being the reason that they're leaving or coming somewhere, let's go to Cleveland. I mean, we have seen 2 things come out of Cleveland recently. One is that their new alternate helmets came out today, where it's just an all-brown helmet with orange stripes.
Was that?
It looked pretty cool. I do wish that they would make the dog their permanent logo and put it on the side of their helmet and everything.
Oh, I would love that.
That would be cool.
The dog pound. Oh, yeah.
The dog, like the one with the like sharp collar. I love that. The second piece of news that we've been seeing coming out of Cleveland recently is that Jimmy Haslam has a lot of ties to the Manning family. Peyton loves him. Eli loves him. They say that he's a fantastic owner and he wants to win. He wants what's best for the team. He wants Like, he's doing everything that he can to try to make this team successful. It's just not going their way. And there's been a lot of sources saying that Arch Manning, if he has a very successful and very good season this year, could skip his senior season for now and come out in the draft next year. And there's been a lot of rumors floating around that Jimmy Haslam has been, trying to lure Arch Manning to Cleveland and get Nick Saban out of retirement to be the head coach.
So I was hearing a lot about that, and to me, it's just such an interesting situation for a few reasons. Is because, number one, like the Arch Manning thing, that's just so Jimmy Haslam because he's got to have a star in there. But I have to see what Arch looks like this upcoming season, and especially when it comes into town in Columbus. I have to see what Texas' season looks like. I still have him as marked to getting into the playoffs. But, again, I have to look for tangibles. I have to look for more than just the sample size I got. Now, as far as for Nick Saban, Saban has been in the NFL before in the past as part of a coaching staff. But, however, it's hard because one of two things. Number one is his ceiling going to be like Pete Carroll? What I mean is that because Carroll had two chances until the third one when he got to Seattle was the best.
Yeah.
Or does Nick Saban become Urban Meyer, where he ended up, so that's a hard gamble.
Saban did learn under Bill Belichick when he was in Cleveland the first time around. He went to college football to get more seasoned, and I think that when he was with Miami, he didn't have a lot to work with. If you give Nick Saban a star quarterback like Arch Manning, if he turns out to be the guy, and then you pair him up with
a very good recruit
defense that could be a dominant force, you could be looking at the next big thing for Nick Saban.
I think it's just it's such a challenge because I also know, Nick Saban comes to the NFL. You already know how the pressers are going to be like. They're going to lose their minds. But my big thing is and I think it's also kind of hard because I love Kevin Stefanski. I really do. But it's, if this was to be the potentiality, my thing with Nick Saban is he will never take no for an answer. We know he's more hardballed. I consider him more of a foxhole guy because it's like he gets the best out of his players. You watch all those games in Alabama, and you know how many times people have actually been commenting a lot about Alabama players is that when they come into the league, right, you are either going to get the actual hits that they've looked to have been in college, or Saban has used up so much of the juice that now these guys, they don't even have great careers. Like Trent Richardson, for example, what he looked like and the promise that he had in the tank, sometimes that does happen. O.J. Howard, the tight end. But then you get a lot of those offensive linemen, D linemen, corners, and then the wide receivers. So it's like, it isn't, I think it will be interesting, but to me, my whole upbringing is I hope that this is a Pete Carroll type of upbringing more than anything else. You're going to get, you look at with the successes of what Jim Harbaugh has been able to do in both levels. As an offensive coach, we know this to be true because offensive coaches, they're very innovative, and usually it depends on what your identity and how innovative you are. But because with Jim, no matter how quirky he may be, it works. He's all about the culture. And by the way, I think it lined up perfectly for the Chargers, and not to mention, too, with what just happened, because they're up in training camp in San Diego. So they are hinting at trying to get all of the San Diegans out there to get them back. Because ultimately, how you felt a lot of the resentment from the ownership. But because Jim Harbaugh is just a breath of fresh air with his quirkiness and his loving personality and passion, that's the stuff that you want to get bought into. By the way, he didn't wear his Charger cap. You know what he wore? He wore his University of San Diego cap because that was his first coaching gig that he got was at the University of San Diego. It's insane.
Yeah, and if this actually turns out to be, a blessing or it could be a curse for them too. Yeah. But I think that if you get Arch Manning and you are able to get Nick Saban, I think his time with the Dolphins, a lot of people don't realize, like, they never really took a look at the roster and they're like, who did he really have as QB? Who did he really have on this team? Like, you're pairing him with guys that he's known for, like Jerry Jeudy and everything, who's been an Alabama guy. You're pairing him with guys that he's very familiar with, like a Myles Garrett, a Mason Graham. You're pairing him with a guy he's also familiar with in the Mannings, with Arch and everything. So you'll have the pieces that you need for this team and pieces that you could put together. And I could see him luring Bill Belichick away from North Carolina to be the DC for him for Cleveland. But, it's going to be interesting. I think that if they're going to go to the route of a defensive-minded coach, I want a younger guy. I want a guy like Jesse Minter and everything, because I think that, we've gone offense for the past 4 head coaches. We need a defensive guy in here that can come in, turn things around, and sit here and, take a whole different perspective on how it is to be an NFL head coach. But moving on to the next bit of news that we have, we're going to stick with the football side of things because we are in that, time frame to where things are going to start. Let's go to college football. Right now at Ohio State, Ryan Day has been leaning more towards Lincoln Kienholz than what he has with Julian Sayin. And it's mostly because Lincoln Kienholz has been on this roster for almost 3 years now, and he knows the guys, knows how to play ball and everything, and they just don't think Julian's ready. But he still has over a month to decide whether or not he wants to start Julian or start Lincoln.
Yeah, that's going to be difficult. And like we said, ultimately, Ohio State, they've lost amount of players due to the draft, and we know that they're still keeping and retaining some of their important pieces. So it is that is an interesting one. But I do think Ohio State, they'll still be up and in good shape. But interestingly enough, I think the quarterback situation, we knew that this was going to be questionable for them. It's the same thing that I even look at with Alabama with like the Ty Simpson look, and he looks good. So there's that certain upbringing, and I think that is what's going to be difficult. But, Ryan Day, he'll figure this out. But I'll tell you what, though, I do feel like there's going to be another Big Ten champion that is going to hoist the national championship. And it may not be Ohio State, in my opinion. I have some high hopes on Penn State. I just think the backfield is legit. They actually retained a bunch of their really good players, including with Drew Aller. So I could see that where Penn State and James Franklin, they're gonna be pretty legit this year.
The problem Penn State had, and they had this last year too, is who did they really have as the offensive weapons? They had Tyler Warren, and that was it. Like you didn't have any guys that really stuck out. Nobody that could make a difference and stuff going down the field and everything. And I think that Drew Aller, realizing that he needed a lot more work on his footwork and timing and everything, was a huge thing for him. And going back, to play one more year was definitely needed. And I think that he's going to come out this year and like show people up and be like, all right, this is Penn State's year, because they were literally one throw, one play away from making it all the way to the national championship and playing Ohio State. And that would have been, a dominant scene, But I agree. It's going to either be between Oregon or Penn State this year for the Big Ten to represent.
But what's funny is of the teams, they all have a similarity to each other, because if you think about it, Michigan, when they won, they had Donovan Edwards and Blake Corum. And then when Ohio State won, they had Quinshon Judkins and Travion Henderson. These two backfield guys are legit NFL prospects right now. And that's why I think, Penn State, they're utilizing exactly that recipe of success that these last two national champions have done. And furthermore, I think the hardest thing is like, now they do have a bigger tight end as well that's a little similar to Tyler Warren. May not have the upside potential, but is kind of closest to it. So that's where I think, Penn State, they've never been known to have an over-the-top receiver. I mean, they had a couple that they thought about but entered the transfer portal because they wanted more money or they wanted to go into a plug-in in a different offense. But I do know this, that even the last receiver that they had, Chris Godwin, was their only one that I know that actually had that potential. But
and Parker Washington as well, but he got so far down on the Jags depth chart that he never really got a chance to show himself. And I do think that if he actually was on a team that was needed a wide receiver, I think he could be a potential wide receiver 2 or 3 for a certain NFL team, whichever one. But it's interesting to see what's going to happen and how it's going to go. And, I know that this next year we have a lot of offensive prospects when this year it was more defensive side. You're going to have a lot of QBs drafted in the first round. You're going to have a lot of offensive linemen drafted in the first round. And you might have a couple wide receivers drafted in the first round this year. And I think that that's one thing that you're going to see Cleveland go after is an offensive lineman and a safety. You're going to see them see the Saints go after a QB. You're going to see a couple other teams go after some. So it's going to be interesting. It seems like every other year we switch back and forth between a defensive heavy draft and an offensive heavy draft. But now it's going to be interesting to see what college football has to offer this year and what they're going to bring. And I have been hearing that, the NFL, or not the NFL, the NCAA, Players Association and the NCAA as a whole have wholeheartedly been contemplating on getting a commissioner into the league so they can start managing everything.
I mean, they should. I mean, we've been talking about getting a CEO for a long time, so they should.
Yeah. They're fully throwing around the idea and thinking about it and actually going to start talking about it and voting on it probably at the end of this year.
Yeah. I like I said, I because there's so much and there's new money going around, you just have to be able to get stuff in the line. So
yeah.
They definitely All right, Jason the News.
This is the Hot Press.
Good stuff, man. Ben Strober, shout out to him, man. Really good stuff here, talking Wizards and talking basketball. I just am looking at this situation in just a couple minutes here before we wrap up, but I just look at this situation with Cincinnati, Chase, and I am like, Mike Brown, by far, should be taking every single shot that's coming at him because Shamar Stewart and the Trey Hendrickson thing is just embarrassing for the entire organization because I was actually watching quarterback last night, and I was watching the Joe Burrow, Jared Goff, and Kirk Cousins the second season, and Joe Burrow is constantly getting his ass kicked. And my thing is this.
Yep.
Is that you're talented up in offense, but defensively, the thing is that you're trying to get better up front, and you're also trying to get better at your secondary. And all of those that contribute to a team going to the playoffs and winning playoff games. And Joe Burrow can do that, but he can't do it when he's constantly pulled back by a team that won't pay. And we know that they're getting T. Higgins and Jamar Chase, great, but it's not going to solve your problem up and on defense. You got Trey Hendrickson who's unhappy, but here's the thing. What most people, and we've actually heard about this before too, is that Trey Hendrickson is a very good just as a good edge because he can give you 17.5 sacks. He's been shown to do that, but we know he's been atrocious against the run. That's what's been the hard part. And that's why you drafted Shamar Stewart, because you wanted somebody that can obviously stuff the run and somebody that can give you sacks as well. So to not have either of them happy, my big thing is this. If you know you're not going to pay Trey Hendrickson, then you're better off to trade him for picks. But then at the same time, don't make your first-round pick unhappy, okay? The thing about this is, and what I did not like was, I don't know if you saw the interview on Mike Brown, but when he pointed out a comment that didn't sit well with me because that's not the way that you really want to approach it, especially when you're talking about like if he committed a crime or like all the rest of it. First of all, why should that be the first thing on your mind? It's like, is that what Shamar Stewart's doing? I'm pretty sure that he's out working out. And all it is it's the language of the contract. That's all that it is. Because Cincinnati, and you can already see it up in full swing, they do not like to pay. They're cheap. And it's hard. That's why, did you see recently that the Tampa Bay Rays ended up getting bought for the amount that they did?
Did they actually?
They did.
Yeah. I knew that they were going to.
The new ownership now. And then the year before
that's
prior,
amazing. What was the price?
I think it was like $1.7 billion.
Literally, I was seeing the idea thrown around. That's why they were not going to get a new stadium for Tropicana Field, because the owner knew that there was things going on that he did not want to throw out the money to do that.
Well, I know, and I've heard from fans in Tampa Bay that usually the drives there are usually kind of they're kind of a little bit of a hectic drive. So that's why they wanted to put it in a different location up and in there so that it was easier for at least for parking reasons, traffic reasons, and all the rest of it. So, but the thing about it is that if you know you can't even pay up into these players, then sell the team. We've said this all the time. Is it because a lot of them they go into their pockets and then they're expecting to like really pay out the amount that they do, but you have shareholders for a reason. Yep. I don't understand. So it's just that in this type of situation up from here, again, I understand what he's trying to come across with that, with skepticism, but that's not the way you want to go about it. It's really not. And it's just, I just think right now it's just embarrassing for Cincinnati. And the thing about it is that Washington, at least Washington, we know that they're going through a situation, but it's not like Cincinnati. And you're gonna you bring Shamar Stewart to replace Trey Hendrickson at the end of the day. But now you got both of them not happy. And that's going to make it a lot worse for Cincinnati, and it's going to be a lot worse for Joe Burrow too. Because I don't think Joe Burrow, I don't even think that we will ever see him win a Super Bowl in Cincinnati. If he leaves, that's it. And that's the last thing that you want for an organization. I understand it with the whole thing, but you have got to be able to make your players happy. And that's where Cincinnati, once they got up and into the Super Bowl, it's like people didn't realize how they would handle it. Like they didn't even know how to handle it. So get your stuff in check, because at the end of the day, if Shamar Stewart goes back to Texas A&M, now you've lost a first rounder, and that's a waste. And if you lose Trey Hendrickson, if you lose both, not a good season for the Bengals. Not a good season. Baltimore is going to be well ran, and they've got their stuff together. Pittsburgh, I don't know. And then you got Cleveland with a great defense. So, not all in the cards right now for them to just literally flunk this up. I really hope that they don't. So,
it's absolutely insane. It doesn't take much to actually pay somebody. So,
it really doesn't. And neither should it be this complicated. But appreciate everybody for coming on by. Once again, a shout out to Ken Strober, our guest here, talking some Wizards basketball. Appreciate him for stopping by. And of course, as usual, always got some good stuff up and around the corner for everybody for the next couple of episodes on the Snake Sports Talk Show. So just you wait until we see what we have up in store for you guys. Thank you all for coming on by, guys. Remember to check out our website to go through and look at our episodes at snakesportstalkshow.com and merchandise and so much more. Leave also a comment. Leave us your thoughts and reviews there and up and onto the show, because we'd love to hear from all of you guys as the fans. Take care of yourselves, guys, and we will see you guys in the next episode of the Snake Sports Talk Show. Take care, everyone.